She had Billie Eilish style.
Yeah, hey everybody. Miss the Need Take Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Big K.R.I.T record, Digital Roses Don't Die. This is a brand new LP from Mississippi rapper, singer, producer, songwriter, Big K.R.I.T. At the start of the 2010s, as the internet was hitting us with a bit of a rap renaissance, K.R.I.T was blowing up off singles like Country Shit as a fresh new voice from the South. Sure, he wore his influences on his sleeve a little bit, but his lyrical talents and production versatility were both undeniable, and would even prove to be conceptual on subsequent projects like Return of Forever, Forever in a Day, King Remembered in Time. Completely killer projects, though also during this time, K.R.I.T was struggling to sort of make a mainstream break, dropping formal commercial records like Galactica and Live from the Underground through Def Jam. But even though these LPs did have highlights, many of the fans agreed something was kind of missing from them. Now, I'd say this was an artistic growing pain that K.R.I.T pretty much moved through once we hit 2017, and he gave us his immense and fantastic double album Forever is a Mighty Long Time. In a way, I feel like this was the record many of his fans were waiting for all along, which is why the following K.R.I.T Is Here was such a head scratcher when it did drop a few years ago, as this thing in essence was another attempt at making a commercially viable crossover, loaded with trendy features, trap beats, and slick hooks, which isn't inherently a bad thing. There's a lot of good records that use that formula, and sure, it was inspiring to see K.R.I.T crossing over with game changers and superstars like Lil Wayne and J. Cole. But I don't know, there's just something about his songwriting style that doesn't really seem to flourish all that well in this kind of context, because this LP was pretty handily the toughest pill to swallow in his catalog so far. Which brings us to Digital Roses Don't Die, which has a lot of things compounding on it all at once. This thing is a narrative, it's an expression of love, it is also a bold stylistic switch up for K.R.I.T too, which sees him working in more elements of smooth soul, pop, and synth funk. This project also works in 4 parts, with its various sections being separated by these elemental interludes: fire, earth, water, and wind, which I suppose are portraying different stages of a relationship. The fire interlude, for example, is a short piece about the burning passion of a love that is just beginning. The interludes, in my opinion, are not the best, but in a way they are a necessary evil, as they introduce us to these different stages of the relationship, with, again, fire, things beginning here in terms of this love, and wind, the fire essentially getting blown out, and now the love is kind of gone, things are over. And while I do appreciate that all these songs in the track list builds up into this larger love story, when we dive into each individual track and the progression of this whole thing, it's really low on details. Like, there's not a lot of specifics to what exactly goes on in this relationship, why it's so good in the first place, what keeps it going, and why it falls apart. Like, I've never heard K.R.I.T in his whole career attach such strong feelings to such vague ideas, narratively and instrumentally. There are even some tracks and moments on this LP that barely sound like K.R.I.T. Like the song It's Over Now, for example. The lackluster falsetto vocals and overcompressed bass on the mix on this one. Like, if it were any other artist, I would have skipped in the first 30 seconds. Let me make this clear. I'm not crazy about this record. I don't enjoy this record, but I don't think it suffers from the same problems as K.R.I.T's last LP. Like, this thing is not some watered down attempt to make a super marketable album. Being familiar with K.R.I.T's back catalog, it's pretty clear the only thing guiding him on this one is his heart and his artistic instincts too. Cause the notes of soul and funk that are peppered throughout this album have been pretty key components of all of his projects in the past. But now what's changed is these sounds are really coming out in full force, and I think in a way the lesson of this project is the difference between merely referencing a vibe, a style, or a genre in your music generally, and trying to wholly embody it and not doing it all too well. Take the teaser single So Cool, for example, which is a really awkward combination of these fast, peppy rap beats and ambient key layers, some jazzy chord changes as well, combined with these soul-inspired vocal leads that are more cartoony than competent. There's a really weird song structure to this track too, like every transition into the next section is odd and kind of breakneck, and no one part lasts long enough to really develop and leave a strong impression on you. Like, the verses are absolutely scant, skeletal. By the time the track is over, and it's just under 2 minutes, it feels more like an interlude than anything. Like, for a track that's about somebody being so cool, it would be nice to know, like, what makes them so cool. Why are they so interesting? I don't know. So yeah, that's kind of a mess. As well as the song Come Out to Play, which, going into it, it's pretty clear that KRIT's intentions here were to make a nuanced and sensual funk track, but it mostly just ends up sounding like a bad music bed for an old porno. And once again, the song on this track sounds more like an interlude than a formal song, which is odd for KRIT, because historically he's been very, very much about his clear-cut songcraft, like standout verses, super bold, catchy choruses, contrast and progression along the length of the song. But for the most part on Digital Roses, like, that's just not here. There are even spots on this LP where I think the narratives of these tracks like trump the music and the quality of the songwriting itself. South Side of the Moon, for example, which is a pretty cool cut about, you know, that initial meeting between, you know, the two characters that are in love on the record, with KRIT rapping about going out to see her and going to different places and time zones to make things work. But the super repetitive refrains and skeletal beat just kind of makes me feel like there's not enough meat on the bone with this one. Then there's also the track Boring, which I get the sentiment, I get the point, the comfort, relaxation, and even domestication that comes with the steadiness and the predictability of a long-term loving relationship. Things becoming boring as a result of that. It's a real phenomenon that honestly I think a lot of songwriting doesn't really engage with, maybe because it's not a super exciting or sexy, even like a tragic or dramatic topic. But yeah, this very real feeling I think is attached to a real bad song. The vocal lines across this track are awful. The mentions of having the bills paid and watching TV, but hey, that dick is still really good. Yeah, it's corny as hell. And I think if there was a truly great idea to the core of this song, like, KRIT would have been able to at least stretch it out to 2 minutes, but it's just barely 1:40. Hopefully the sex he's rapping about lasts longer than that. So yeah, there are some spots of this track list that feel like classic KRIT in many ways. Would It Matter, for example, the groovy beats and classy horn lines, combined with the soulful vocal work and southern flows, all work together effectively to create a true message of devotion and really loving and appreciating somebody for who they are. The song Just For You is also another track of devotion that is a true southern banger, vocally and instrumentally. All the Time turns up the heat a little bit on the back end, and it is kind of interesting to hear very subtle notes of Kanye's 808s and Heartbreak turning up as like an influence on the closing track. But outside of that, the highlights on this thing, in my opinion, are very, very scant. And outside of the narrative, the concept this project is attempting, it doesn't really have a whole lot going for it. I think overall this is a very weak breakup record. Like, again, I think KRIT had a story. I think he had an idea here, but he just executed it with very, very, very poor, some of his poorest, in fact, verses, songwriting, song structures, instrumentals, and hopefully we can move past what he's done here onto something more interesting in the very near future. I'm feeling a light to decent 4 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head, it's another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, music, Big KRIT, forever.